virtue means good. Being virtuous and being good are the same things. It's a synonym in a sense. It's just that virtue is a more traditional, philosophically important term. If you think of a good mother is a mother who is able to nurture and educate her child well, the best possible way. As a good attorney is the attorney who is able to defend his client's position the best possible way. And this is what we might call a virtuous mother or a virtuous attorney. We don't say that a virtuous mother is a good mother who is able to nurture and educate her child. That would be too many words, unnecessary words. A virtuous mother is that kind of mother, as a good mother is that kind of mother. So virtue means that we are actually fitting with one purpose. We are the good tool for achieving one purpose, for producing something through our actions. So when we switch to morality, we talk about moral virtues, and moral virtues from this viewpoint is the same thing, it's the same idea. Moral virtue is what makes us able, good tools to perform good actions from the point of view of being morally good, not just from the point of view of some kind of technical result we want to achieve. For example, if we want to build a house, our actions should be fitting with this purpose, building a house. But building a house might be a good thing to do, morally speaking, or a bad thing to do, morally speaking. We might want to build a house so that the house can serve some kind of criminal purposes, criminal design. That the house will be a place where people can, manufacture drugs or store weapons, whatever. Or can be just a very nice family house. So the point of view of the virtue is not the technical result of our action, it's the moral result. So when we are morally good, we are able to perform good actions because we are good. We have some kind of special quality in ourselves. So Aristotle had a very nice way to distinguish the moral virtue from the technical virtue. He said that when we are technically virtuous, we can make a mistake, a very sophisticated, advanced mistake. And we might be the only one noticing it. Imagine a piano player performing a great symphony, I wish I could, but I cannot. I used to play some piano when I was younger, but nothing like that. But I know how difficult it is, right? So being a good piano player takes years and years and years. I guess 10 years in most countries just to be, proficient. And then you start, doing something professional with it. So an excellent piano player can perform a symphony and make such a small mistake that just, extremely good piano players can detect that mistake. Ordinary people cannot. So the intentional mistake from this viewpoint is a sign of being really good, of being virtuous, a virtuous piano player. But a moral person cannot make an intentional mistake, because the intentional mistake in morality means to have an evil intention. Imagine a good mother who wants to make an intentional mistake being equal of hating her child. That's not possible, because virtues is the opposite, it's the other way around. So in morality you cannot make an intentional mistake. Being virtuous means to want, to will the good. This is what moral virtue means, but so we can compare it to a sort of muscle. It's not that easy to achieve virtue. Virtue is actually a very difficult achievement. It's something we need to struggle with. We need to, like piano players, they train for years and years, and it's very complicated. If you have ever tried to play an instrument, you know that at the beginning there are things that you do which are actually opposite to what you might naturally want to do spontaneously. So, for example, the way you put your hands on the keyboard is actually not the way that people might do at the beginning if they don't have any idea about piano playing. So what they call it posture or something like that, in Italian is postura. So you have to actually even feel pain for the way you actually put your hand on the keyboard. That way it seems to be counterintuitive. As in some sports, you do movements which are not spontaneous. I used to be a gymnast when I was younger. When you do some gymnastics, you have to train yourself, for example, to jump backward. And that's totally different than what you would do. I mean, you tend to turn, but because you want to see where you're jumping towards. But you don't have to. You actually have to jump without seeing. So it's very counterintuitive, but it's the best way to do it. So you need to struggle for a while, and then after a while, you are able to do it the right way, and which is the best possible way. You cannot play piano, really advanced piano, a good symphony, without the right way to put your hands on the keyboard, and you cannot jump and do a back tack or a back flip, whatever, in gymnastics, if you tend to look at the wrong things. So, in a sense, at the beginning, you have to struggle against what might seem spontaneous to your body, to your mind. Then it becomes easier. So, when you actually do that, in order to acquire virtue, whether on the technical side or on the moral side, you need to struggle. But then what you do is that it's like you wear a special dress. So, a more traditional term for virtue would be a habit. Habitus in Latin, meaning a kind of cloth, a piece of cloth, like this sport coat. So when you actually are wearing this dress, you have a special power. It's like in a fantasy movie, right? You have the magical dress. So virtue is like magic. So it makes you able to do something which is more than what an ordinary person might do, but in this case from a moral standpoint. At that point, once you have that dress, when you are good at it, you can do it with some kind of spontaneity. It becomes spontaneous for you, but not to perform the action, but to make the decision. So the moral virtues doesn't make it easy. It makes it easy, the decision. So, for example, as a virtuous soldier, I know that what I have to do is to give my life for my country when the situation requires to do that. So I know that I have to do it, even though it's going to be really painful and hard to do it. A good mother knows that maybe she needs to wake up in the middle of the night to help the crying child or baby or whatever. She does it with some kind, it's kind of spontaneous for her to do it, but it's spontaneous, the decision, not the doing of it, which is terrible. You know, sometimes you're really sleepy, you have to make a huge effort, you wish you had slept more. So the virtue, again, doesn't make easier moral life from the viewpoint of, you know, how hard it can be for your body and your mind to do that, but it makes the decision easy. The good person knows what to do and knows that he or she will just do it. So, but the doing of it is very difficult. So virtue makes very difficult the acquiring of the virtue. So, you know, the training, like the piano player, so the 10 years or whatever it takes to have a better virtue, to acquire, so we struggle to be generous and we become generous, we struggle to be punctual, we become punctual, we struggle to be understanding with our friends, we become understanding. So we acquire equality in ourselves through our actions, and that takes struggle, and sometimes it seems like we are going against our nature, against ourselves, because we do something which is not spontaneous at the beginning, but it does become spontaneous at the end, because it is what actually matches better our nature, the development, the moral development of our nature. So nature, from this viewpoint, virtue requires some kind of constant practice, like in any other human abilities, like the piano player or any other profession. We need to work on it every day with constant struggle, trying to do what we have to build up that kind of trait of our personality. And then it requires a good decision, knowing what we need to do. And then something special happens, is something that we don't usually think of very often. Sometimes we think of our actions as something that affect external reality, the world outside ourselves or other people. We affect other things through our actions. It's like a movement. We act, and it's a movement from us to something else. Maybe other people, the world outside. We build a house, we are changing the world, so a house will be there. But actually, morally speaking, we do much more than that. Morally speaking, while changing the world and other people, we actually change ourselves. So we are building the kind of persons we will be. So in a sense, when as time goes by, we will be the persons we choose to be through our actions. That's what virtue does. It's a counter movement. It goes back on ourselves. So we try to be courageous, and by doing something, courageous actions, affecting, of course, the world outside. We might be soldiers in a war, we might win the war, but actually we are becoming courageous. So we'll be that kind of person. An unpleasant person will become unpleasant. Very often, we probably have met, as I did, some people who maybe reached the age of 50 or 60, and they built a personality which might be really selfish or unpleasant. They just cannot think of other people because they didn't live their lives trying to build different kind of qualities in their persons. So virtues actually make us the people we want to be. They are a building person device. So this is how we should think of the virtues. And we cannot stop building our personality. If we don't do anything, that's already a bad decision. So we'll become lazy, which is a vice, it's not a virtue. So we are doomed to be virtuous people, or at least moral agents. So we can just decide to be either very good people, virtuous people, or not very good people. Ethics, from this viewpoint, moral theory, whatever you want to call it, moral philosophy, it's much more correctly focused not on what the right action is, which is something important too, in a sense discovering the rule of this action, the precept or one principle. For example, is this a just action or a courageous action or a liberal, a generous action? This is important. We need to know that when we choose to do something. But most of all, we actually want to be one kind of, we prefer to have the good person, the virtuous person, that will be the source of good and virtuous actions, rather than have just the recipe for one good action. Because after all, the good action will be the one performed by the virtuous person. Besides, in many circumstances, life is very rich, it's kind of nuanced. So you need the right person to figure out what morality requires in very complex, changing circumstances. For example, the piano player or a good professional might have to change something fast and you know, in a very clever and smart way, in one peculiar circumstance, because things change and life is very rich. If you are just following rules, you will not be able to catch up with life. The virtuous person will be always creative. He will just, or she will just do the right thing at the right time, because for her or him, making the right decision, it's easier, it's more spontaneous, it matches the kind of quality, the muscles they have built through their lives. So virtuous person, after all, is like a bodybuilding personality. It's like bodybuilding activity, but with morality. And after all, we have the right rule of moral action, which is the virtuous person. It's like focusing on person, not on rules. This is what people usually call virtue ethics today.